want to welcome everybody to the West Ada School Board meeting this evening. It is September 12th at 6 o'clock. We are so excited tonight to have Sienna Elementary School here to lead us in the pledge. If everyone will please stand. Thank you so much. That was great. You guys did a great job. Thank you. All right, the next item on our meeting is our agenda approval. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are not, Madam Chair.
All right, fantastic. We'll go forward with our superintendent update. Dr. Bubb.
Madam Chair, trustees, just a couple little notes here. Facility needs survey has gone out to the general public. We're just trying to assess where we're at facilities and come up with creative solutions to be able to meet the needs that our schools have and that our community has within our schools. Back to school night is this week. I highly encourage our parents to get out to our schools, meet the teachers, see some of the great things going on in our classrooms. We haven't been able to have a true back to school night in a long time, so we're excited to bring our patrons back into our schools. And then the last one, I'll just give everybody kind of an update on transportation. I want to start with a quick thank you and recognition to Cascade and our West Ada transportation team. The team continues to look at ways to meet the school's transportation needs. This includes additional routes, school of choice transportation, and special programs transportation. We recognize that it has not been perfect. We know that there are some schools that continue to struggle with transportation needs, but we are trying to address these on a daily basis. Currently, just so everybody can get an overview of West Ada transportation, we transport about 12,000 students per day. It's an increase of 27% this year. It's the largest number of students that we've had in 10 years using our bus services. We sent a survey out earlier last week to find out what on time looked like, and on time was defined as within 5 minutes of the bell ringing to get the kids to school, and 90% of all buses were recognized as being there on time. Last year at this point, I'll just say we were not at that 90% on time arrival. Is 90% where we want to be? Absolutely not. We want to improve that. Our team is working on that diligently. We're documenting and addressing every concern regarding bus stop locations and addressing these in our twice weekly meetings with Cascade. We're working on getting parental access to location services to provide accurate drop-off and pickup information. We have 20 additional bus drivers that are in training, which allows us to make further modifications and upgrades to our systems once they have their full training completed. This week, we will begin shuttle busing for our academy students. Those shuttles will go to our main high schools, just as we did last year. And I just want to end with a thank you to the community for their patience through this process. Thank you to the West Ada team for their countless hours that they've put in to improve our operations. And thank you to Cascade for their dedication to making sure our students have reliable transportation. I'll open up to the board for any questions.
Any comments or questions? All right, none at this time. All right, thank you. Okay. All right, next on our list is the Renaissance Culinary chapter from Renaissance High School. They attended the FCCLA Leadership Conference in San Diego, California, July 29th through July 3rd, and I believe we have a video, if we could see that.
I feel like Rowetta was able to make this huge progression, right? She started off in this class, she had a lot of skills, but to be able to refine and hone those skills and then to demonstrate them when it was like under pressure, I was so proud of her for that, and just seeing the hard work that paid off for her. because she practiced a lot. Her family ate a lot of muffins. Like they ate a lot. They ate a lot. They told me. It's like, yep.
When the actual award ceremony started, and you take them, they take you up on the stage, and there's all these lights, and it's so dark. There's so many faces and people. Like I barely, just in time, picked out where Chef Scoville and all my other friends were in the crowd. So I do a little wave at them.
They invited her up onto the huge stage with, there must have been 5,000 or 6,000 people in the audience.
Oh my goodness, wow.
So she's up there, they start calling everybody's names, and they introduce them all, and then they say, now we're going to announce the top 3.
And then they're like, your first place baking and pastry champion from Renaissance High School. And when they said Renaissance, I was like, that's me. So my jaw dropped.
And we were like, we were cheering so loud, we were screaming. She was like stuck like blood. And she went up onto a huge podium, and everyone around us was like high-fiving and cheering. And
then, I mean, it's just a blur. I kind of stumbled, got myself together, got up on the podium. They hand you this big flag, you take a picture, and I was just so happy. Like the adrenaline, it's wild.
I think that one of the biggest things for our CTE programs and having these student organizations is the chance that it gives them to see outside of the school day.
Sure.
You know, they're learning all of these things and they're like, okay, this is great, but to see themselves in another situation and to be able to apply what they've been practicing and learning, I think it kind of opens their eyes and it opens doors as well.
But then it's like to compete and go and do that with the time and with the people and all of the measuring and cleanup and stuff you have to do as well in the actual competition. You realize, like, I can do this. Like, we've been training for the last 3 years, and all of a sudden it's like I've done something that shows that those classes are paying off, if that makes sense.
Sure,
like it's
absolutely.
a visual, like, I guess, reminder that you've done something that matters.
That is fantastic. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts? I want a cupcake. I know that. All right, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Kim, for putting that together. All right, next on our agenda is our consent agenda. So at this time, I'm open for a motion. Anyone? Motion, anyone? Vice Chair Zuna.
Madam Chair, I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
Excellent. Do I have a second? Trustee Redford?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries 5-0. Next is our discussion section, and Marcus Myers will be first up, our Chief Academic Officer, and will talk with us about the 22-23 Continuous Improvement Plan. This will be a third reading.
All right, good evening, Chair, Trustees, Superintendent Dr. Bubb. I come before you this evening to talk about the third reading of West Ada's SIP plan, or the Continuous Improvement Plan. As a reminder, and for our patrons who may be listening in addition to reviewing this later, just want to review the why and the purpose behind this quickly, talk about what the SIP plan is and isn't. This information hasn't changed for the board, but just in review for the public. Again, this is a goal-setting document for the 22-23 school year, and we are required to make this public for not only transparency and communication, but also to use this as a planning document for ourselves to say this is the product, the goal, the end date of what we expect from ourselves and our students at the end of the school year. Again, I want to recognize that there are faces behind these numbers, and every student who meets those goals, every student who gets toward those goal progress has a teacher behind that, has an instructional staff behind them, that is that level of success that got them there. And so I do want to recognize those faces behind the numbers that are in this document. It identifies academic achievement and proficiency using statewide metrics. These are measures that we use across the state of Idaho. It is an accountability document and intended to be so rather than a planning document. And it is required through statute to be posted on our website by October 1st. If approved this evening by the trustees, we'll easily meet this deadline. And again, this document represents the impact our teams make across the names, faces, and futures of over 40,000 West Ada students. Again, this information is about what it is and what it's not. It is a common reporting protocol for every school, public school in the state of Idaho. What it isn't, though, is an ongoing collection of student achievement data throughout the course of the year. It is a reporting tool, but not a strategic planning tool, although we do use that reporting tool to say what are our long-term goals and short-term goals so that we meet those. It does use previous year's data when applicable and goal only, but it doesn't actually identify what happened last year as far as progress toward those goals. We do that within our own school success planning and with our own district planning. It is a one-time communication tool for stakeholders, although I will be addressing progress toward those goals with the board formatively as we move forward throughout the course of the school year. And it does identify that product at the end of the year, like I mentioned, where we also identify the process by which we get there throughout the course of the year. Just want to note some of the third revision changes on this third reading. I did revise the report of progress narrative, mostly within format and grammatical corrections, and then also finalize college and career advising results and goals. This is a metric that is reported on the SIP plan, and then a goal creation on actuals that on those numbers we were able to collect during that time frame once school year started. Again, the goals that we set in West Ada are goals, they're ambitious goals, and with that meaning that we set goals and really swing for the fences with student learning. We want to set high goals knowing that we're going to get there, our processes are going to get us there. Whether we meet those goals or not, we want to make sure that we're continuing our progress in West Ada, because no matter the goal, until that product is 100%, we're not settled by where we end the year. Next steps. It is an action item, it is an action item for approval at tonight's meeting. If approved, we'll post on the West Ada website before the end of the week, and we'll send to the State Board of Education for review and approval. Again, there is a review committee that reviews each of the plans, and then feedback is provided back to myself and Dr. Bubb in terms of any suggestions for revisions. If those revisions do require content in the plan to be changed, we'll be sure to bring that back to the school board for your review, update, and approval. Likely, though, these are formatting changes. Some data at the state level isn't available yet, but is unlikely to change the goals on the plan since we set ambitious goals. However, if that isn't the case, and we do need to revise some of those based on that data collected, we will update and inform you should they need to be adjusted. And again, just want to mention this, what we do with the plan started on the very first day of school. Those plans are already in place, and in fact, our next key date is September 26th, when we meet as Leadership Institute. Those are collaborative teams of leaders to say, where did we end the year with student learning? What are those processes by which we identified at the end of last school year, and where are we at now with implementing those changes, knowing that we've taken our first district-wide benchmark or data dip towards student achievement thus far with our new students coming in and our next grade level cohorts. At this time, trustees, I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you may have and reverse this slide at the same time.
Any questions? That was fantastic. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I noticed in my excitement to hear from you, Greg and Jonathan, I went ahead and skipped patron comment. Good job, Lori. We didn't have anybody sign up tonight, but I did want to make sure there wasn't anyone that wanted to speak. All right, thank you. Okay, next we have Greg Wilson, our Chief Communications Officer, who will do our communications policy. This is a second reading.
Chair Frazier, trustees, Dr. Bubb. I'm here to present the second reading of the new communications policies for the district, which will be a new section 1100. This draft reflects the feedback I've received in the past few weeks and continues to attempt to balance policy with procedure. Just to be clear with the board, the plan is to delete 2 existing policies which cover communications and existing policies. And as a reminder to the board, these are staff media interactions contained in policy number 403.2, which was adopted 28 years ago, and the school publications policy, policy number 503.2, which is adopted 13 years ago. And ultimately, the intent and content from these old policies will be incorporated in the new policies. So again, just for a refresher, there are 7 subsections of the new communications policy section, and let me provide a quick outline and deliver a Cliff Notes version of each one. Policy 1100 is the vision and goals of this overall communications policy, and ultimately the philosophy that underlies this vision is continuous improvement and flexibility in the constantly changing media environment. Policy 1101 deals with school-based communications. With the premise that school buildings are the most important communication source for our families and community, school community, we at the district will support their efforts, and we lay out the necessity for a school-based website, a school-based newsletter, school-based social media accounts, along with email, text, and voice calls to supplementing to keep parents in school community informed. And that's an addition that we just included. Policy 1102 covers media relations. And again, the goal is to ensure responsiveness to our media partners, but the district's communications team will be point in supporting and directing those responses to media inquiries. Policy 1102.1 covers public records requests and data requests, and it makes clear the district's intent to follow the law and directs to folks that receive those kinds of inquiries, those kinds of requests, to forward them to the clerk of the board where they can be fulfilled in a timely and lawful manner. Policy 1102.2 deals with school publications, and much of that is carryover from previous policy and provides guidance for school publications. Policy 1103 covers district and school operated social media. This policy emphasizes the importance of social media and provides some guidelines for successful utilization of social media. And an update to the policy from the first reading just states that all official West Ada social media accounts will be published on the district website. And finally, policy 1103.1 covers employee use of social media. And this policy makes clear staff responsibilities around private social media usage and guidelines to protect everyone, ultimately aligned with the Code of Ethics for Professional Educators. And accompanying these policies, in order to implement them, are 4 sections of administrative procedure. And there are not corresponding administrative procedures for each of the policies. Ultimately, they don't need them, but for 4 of them, there are administrative procedures that accompany the policies. And some of the highlights of these include, and I talked about this at the first reading, to support school-based communications, each principal will designate a media coordinator called a brand ambassador, responsible for managing a school's website, newsletter, social media, and other communications. And Danielle Hannon on my team, in working with Nikki, are implementing that communications infrastructure at the school building level. And another important administrative procedure is that the district's chief communications officer, again, is the point person for media requests, and the principal is the point person within the school building for coordinating these kinds of requests and their fulfillment. In the coming weeks, I guess 2 weeks, we're going to continue to solicit final feedback in advance of the final reading of these policies later this month. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
All right, do we have any questions? All right, excellent job. Pardon me, Trustee Zuna.
Mr. Wilson, I just wanted to thank you for intentionally reaching out, having conversations with the association and others to make sure that you gathered and considered the feedback in putting this policy together. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Okay, thank you. Next, we have Jonathan Gillen, our Chief Operations Officer, who will do the presentation of the District L2 form.
Good evening, Chair, Trustees, Dr. Bubb. So a few weeks ago, we talked about the L2 form, and we just started with, hey, we're just going to listen tonight, and we're going to learn a little bit. Well, tonight we're going to take the next step, and we're going to talk about approval. So what we're going to talk about, we're going to spend some time talking about funding streams. We're going to have a little bit of discussion about the emergency levy, how it's calculated. We're going to talk a little about the other funding streams. I specifically identify the emergency levy separately, and that's specifically because we're going to have a conversation about that a little bit. Then we'll talk about overall changes year over year. You're going to get to see a picture of the L2 form, which I know you've been waiting for. It's been what you've been hoping. So we're going to get to see that. You're going to see the form that gets submitted. And then I've done a levy rate estimate calculation. And so we'll get to walk through all of those. So let's start with funding streams, the dollar amounts you're going to see on the L2 form. So there's a lot of information on the L2 form. We capture a lot of budget data. We talk about what is potentially fund balance from an accounting perspective. Remember, some of these terms are starting to come back after we talked about during the budget. They're going to show up again. But really at the end, it's really about what is the balance to be levied. And that you'll see on the form. I'm going to walk through each of the dollar amounts. So for the tort levy, we're going to levy right at $546,000. That number has not changed from the last time we met. The supplemental levy, that's $14 million. Remember, that's voter approved. So our voters approved that back in November. And so we'll start the 2-year levy process with that. The emergency levy. And so last time when we had talked about the budgeted dollar amount. And so now you're going to see a recommendation from the administration coming to you to have that levy be zero. And there's going to be a slide that we're going to talk about. We'll walk through the calculation and a little bit of the why behind that. The plant facility levy, this is also voter approved. It was approved back in 2017. It's a 10-year levy. And so we levy $16 million every year. Those are used for capital and facility needs. And so that'll be just a roll from the previous year. And then we have bonds. And that's roughly $30.4 million. And again, those are bonds. That's paying back the bonds and the construction that's already been approved by the taxpayers. And that $30 million should be a number that as we start talking, and as you remember, we're kind of hovering around that number, right? With all the defeasance and the refundings that we've done, that's around where our target is. So again, total amount that we're going to talk about this year is $60.96 million, which is a slight reduction from last year's $61.4. I'll say the emergency levy. So we're going to spend a little time talking about this calculation. So how do we do it? It's essentially a comparison of attendance. I'm going to say that again, just because we've had a lot of conversation about attendance versus enrollment. The way the emergency levy calculation works is it's based on attendance, year-over-year increases. And so we're going to compare the same time period in 21-22 to how we're currently doing this year. We do move outliers, so if you can see, we took 11 days of attendance. We took out the high and the low days to basically build up an average from that and compared that year over year. Here's where there's going to be a change from the PowerPoint slides you have seen. I have to apologize, I made an error. And so as we were looking at the calculations, as I was running numbers again over the weekend and even into today, we had an error in our spreadsheet. We had missed one of the schools. And so it's not going to change the L2 form at all. Because if you remember, we're talking about only what it is we're going to levy, and the emergency levy recommendation is zero. What it does talk about is what we could have levied. And so in this case, the district was eligible based on attendance for roughly $8.7 million. And again, our recommendation is going to be, you're going to hear zero. And so how that calculation works, we take the increase in attendance for our students, we multiply that by a per student amount. It's roughly $6,000. We'll just keep it pretty easy from there. And then that's actually how much the district, again, is eligible for. Again, just to be clear, right, even though we're eligible for it, our recommendation right now is to keep that at zero. Other funding streams. Talked a little about these dollar amounts, right? The tort levy, we get roughly $546,000. Its design is to be paid for liability insurance to use by the district. It does not cover all the cost. I can tell you this year it's roughly $970,000 for liability insurance. So it hovers around covering half. That calculation itself is embedded in a couple of other things. It looks at market rates. It also looks at personal property tax returns, lots of other dollar amounts we receive from revenue streams. So supplemental levy, again, we kind of talked about that. That's the $14 million. It's voter approved. This will be the first year of us levying what was approved in November of 21. So we'll have that eligible for 2 years. The plant facility levy, again, that's a 10-year levy, voter approved. We should have that levy in place and authorization through 2027. And at that point, the district and the board will have to make a decision going forward. And then again, bonds, this is voter approved repayment of authorizations. Bond funding can only be used to repay debt. And so I just guess want to be clear, that's money that's deposited into a bond fund, can't be used for operational purposes. It's specifically to repay the debt holders and the bond holders. So changes from previous year. Tort levy increased about $50,000. That's not unusual. As market value increases, it's impacted by that. So that would be around standard. Bonds, a reduction of roughly $500,000 year over year. That's why you saw that 61.4 to 60.9. It's largely driven off the changes in the bond. Supplemental plant facility was no changes. Emergency levy, we didn't ask for one, recommend asking for one last year. Same recommendation of not asking for one this year. And so overall, you have a decrease of roughly $450,000. So this is the L2 form. I gave you the very abridged version. There's like 8 spreadsheets that I fill out. There's a lot of other information, but this is the one that really matters. So this is the picture. This is what the state is going to look at and what the county is going to look at and say, that's your balance to be levied. And so our process is to prepare a draft, provide that for you. At the same time, we also have our municipal financial advisor review that from the bond perspective. And then we also actually reach out to the counties and have them do a preliminary review as well. And so this is actually what you'll be approving, is the balance to be levied. You see that way over there in the right-hand column? Those dollar amounts should align up with exactly what we've been talking about. And that is what then the county and the state tax commission will use to levy. Levy rate estimate. So I'll tell you that I've calculated this. We don't actually get to make this calculation. That's done by the county and the state. So I just gave you a preview. The one thing I'll probably tell you, it probably won't be 1.12 over the last 5 years. I have tried every year, and every year I'm off by like a penny or two. Always kind of drives me bonkers. But so anyway, that's the estimated market value. Usually you have some changes associated with market value for utilities or someone who files for a change in estimate. And so that projected levy rate probably will adjust slightly. Just know that that's around the balance that we're going to be looking at. And with that, I can stand for any questions you have.
Are there any questions? Trustee Benetti?
So I had a question. The tort actual costs were close to $900,000, and then the levy addresses half of that. Does the rest of that come out of the general fund, or is it dealt with at a state level? Or?
Chair and Trustee Benetti, there are other funding streams. We get what's called replacement taxes that are not levied, and so we get roughly $4,503 per quarter in that, and then we get a couple of other replacement taxes. So it comes pretty close. I would say, ballpark at the top of my head, it covers like 85 or 90. You're just not going to see it all in this form here. There are other taxes that essentially are remitted by the state to us directly.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Zinna?
Thank you. Mr. Gillen, that levy rate is really low. In fact, I think it's the lowest that I've ever seen it. How does that compare to other districts in our area or even throughout Idaho?
Yeah. Chair and trustees, so we are the lowest in comparison with the valley, and so I anticipate will continue to be that. I have not yet talked with my peers. They are all probably approving their L2 forms either Friday or Monday. So usually what happens over the next couple of days is we'll all start sharing what our numbers are. But in the past we have been the lowest levy rate in the valley, and so I anticipate we'll continue to be that.
I just want to make one comment on the emergency levy. You know, I greatly appreciate that we're sensitive to our taxpayers and that we really need to do our best with our tax dollars. But not taking this emergency levy, I don't want anybody to think that we believe that schools are funded appropriately, because we have a long way to go. I don't think we certainly can't use our emergency levy for things like staff funding, things that are continuous. So, you know, I appreciate where we're at right now, but I think we have a long way to go still with school funding.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, thank you so much. Okay, that moves us to the action portion of our meeting. The first item up is our continuous improvement plan. I'm open for a motion. Trustee Benetti?
I move that we accept the continuous improvement plan as presented by the Chief Academic Officer, Marcus Myers.
Excellent. Do we have a second? Trustee Bachman?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I'm now open to a motion on the L2 form. Trustee Benetti?
I move that we accept the L2 form as presented by the Chief Operations Officer, Jonathan Gillen.
Is there a second? Trustee Bachleon?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Are there any future agenda items anyone like to see? All right. With that, we will adjourn for the evening. Have a lovely, oh, pardon me. Oh, I said, sorry. I'm very excited, evidently. I'm open for a motion to adjourn tonight. Trustee Redford.
Motion to adjourn, please.
Is there a second? Trustee Bachleon.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? My daughter, who has been gone for a couple months, is calling tonight, and I might be a little excited to get home and see her. I'm sorry. We will now adjourn. Thank you.